Welcome back to AP U.S. History. This is Chapter 8. This will be Part 2. We've talked about some of the problems that the new nation faced after its independence from Great Britain. We're going to take a look at the Articles of Confederation, some of its strengths and some of its weaknesses, how it became our first Constitution. It was proposed but finally ratified in 1781. Dickinson was the one who created the Articles of Confederation and introduced it to the Second Continental Congress in 1777. One of the reasons for its delay was over Western lands. This shows a picture of the Articles of Confederation. The Western lands became a sticking point. There were some states who owned land and others who didn't. 7, about half and half, especially New York and Virginia, had large holdings in the Ohio area west of the Allegheny Mountains, in the Appalachian Mountains. 6 states like Pennsylvania, Maryland had no territories at all. A certain part of the government wanted the Western lands to be turned over to the federal government and let them administer it and sell it. They thought that would be a good idea to raise money for the new government and pay off some of the debts that they had incurred during the war. This shows some of the claims that the Western or some of the states had on the Western land. And eventually they will all give up the territory in the West and turn that over to the federal government. And the sale of the Western lands really was a good source of revenue. The government wasn't huge, so they didn't need as much revenue as they will need later. Now, some provisions of this new Constitution. You needed unanimous approval and to ratify the Articles of Confederation, and that will come in 1781. Eventually New York and Virginia will surrender their lands. Congress promised that any new states that were carved out of this new territory in the West would become states through a process, and they would have the same rights as the older states, same equal status. Now, the first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, what were some of the provisions found in it? It really was a loose association of states. Their primary concern, the new government, was foreign affairs and defense. They had very little control or no control over commerce and taxing in the new nation. Congress was the only branch of government. There was no executive branch because they feared that a president might become a dictator or a new king. As far as judicial branch, they decided that it would be better if the legal matters were handled by individual states. Each state had a single vote in this new government, which gave smaller states like Rhode Island a distinct advantage. If you wanted to pass a bill, it required 2/3 of the body to pass the measure. Again, this shows the Articles of Confederation. To amend the Articles of Confederation, you needed unanimous consent, and that would be all states voting for it. The problem with the Articles of Confederation is it was just too weak and ineffective to govern. It was done this way simply to give the individual states more power than the federal government. Two of the severe limitations: they had no power to regulate commerce, and states taxed imported goods from other states. Some states were making separate treaties with foreign countries. They could not raise taxes. States would voluntarily send in revenue at the request of the federal government. They could not act directly upon individual citizens. States would enforce laws passed by the central government. So they couldn't enforce the laws, they couldn't raise taxes, and essentially was done this way to weaken the federal government. They certainly were vulnerable to internal conflicts, and there will be several that the federal government cannot handle at all. It just doesn't have the manpower to deal with that. The Newburgh Conspiracy is something that has appeared on the AP exam. This was a group of Continental soldiers, officers who had not been paid, decided that they wanted to be paid and forced Congress's hand, and they were going to take over the government. So George Washington heard about this conspiracy. Some of these officers had served under him during the Revolutionary War, and he's going to convince them that they should back off. Now, another problem that took place during this time is going to be Shays' Rebellion. This happened in 1786. A group of farmers led by Captain Daniel Shay are tired of the government foreclosing on their farms and sending them to a debtor prison, and so they're going to take their matters into their own hands. They will rise up and march to Springfield, Massachusetts, to close down the court system. They figure that if the court system is not in session, they won't be able to pass any kind of foreclosures or sentence anyone to jail for not paying their taxes or debts. So they do close the local courts temporarily, but eventually New Englanders will raise a large militia and crush the rebellion. 4 farmers died and Shay was arrested but later pardoned. The rebellion was significant in that it showed that the federal government could not stop an insurrection or rebellion within its borders. Other problems that it faced, this new government, the federal government, was the fact that it had huge debts that needed to be paid. States quarreled over boundaries that couldn't be seem to be settled where the boundaries should go. Some states were printing their own currency. There wasn't a standard currency within the United States. And some states would not pay their fair share of the taxes. They just simply refused. Now, strength of the new government, it was able to organize and sell Western lands. This is probably the high point of this new government. In 1785, the Land Ordinance is passed, which gives the opportunity to survey the land, identify it, and then later sell it. And this is all above the Ohio River. They were hoping that the sale of this western land would pay off some of the national debt. They also passed the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which organized states and territories in this new territory in the Northwest. And so there was a process in place in order to become a state. This Northwest Ordinance here shows how the land was divided on a grid system and a legal description for each piece of property within this area. The new government created this Northwest Territory in 1787, and it takes in Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, fairly large area, and this will be organized and later territories will be created and states will come into the Union. Under this Northwest Ordinance, when a territory had 60,000 inhabitants, it could apply for statehood, and it would have equal status as the older states. One thing that will be a problem for the southern states is that the new territory forbid any slavery above the Ohio River. So this issue comes up again. The Southerners were allowed to reclaim fugitive slaves who might go into this area. But it is going to be something that is eventually going to lead to the Civil War 70 years later. The Annapolis Convention in 1786 was called for the purpose of dealing with the tariffs, taxes among the states. Only 5 states showed up. Alexander Hamilton was the architect for this. They never really settled on how to stop these tariffs between and among states, but he convinced them that they needed a convention the next year to fix the Articles of Confederation. And therefore, they will call a convention in 1787 in Philadelphia, and they will try to, their purpose is to revise or fix the Articles of Confederation. Leading people from the different legislatures in the states will be chosen. 55 delegates will convene in Philadelphia to draft a new or at least fix the Articles of Confederation. These men were all white, older, well-educated. They came from the upper crust of American society. Hamilton, again, is going to be one of the delegates there, among others. One of the first things that they do when they call the convention is that they scrap the Articles of Confederation. George Washington is going to be selected to convene over this new Constitutional Convention because of his revered status within the United States. He is a national hero. Prominent men like Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and Samuel Adams denounced the convention. Notable men who were there who supported it: James Madison, Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams. The sessions were held in secrecy to avoid external pressures. James Madison is called the father of the Constitution, and we'll stop right here and pick this up next time.